Up the recording and admit someone else in and say hello, welcome to you all. If this is your first time, bad luck. But can I say we've been having a great time for several weeks. The background to this is it's really an Evie Figdor and Ronnie Figdor idea dating back almost two years, where we had a Thursday lunch club. In good times, we actually had lunch. We provided a free hot lunch in St Kilda Shul every fortnight, every second Thursday. Went for about an hour and a half, and we had a speaker for about half an hour. You'll have worked out that unfortunately that came to an abrupt pause in mid-March, and things went quiet, and we decided to resurrect the Thursday Lunch Club, but now make it weekly. I welcome you all. It's now all online, and if you've got lunch, you'll have to provide it yourself. If you've got whiskey, I'll let you know my address, and you can drop it off. But otherwise, you're going to have to provide your own lunch. Welcome to you all. Miriam, don't forget you're going to have to unmute yourself in a moment. I've otherwise muted you all in a way that you can't unmute yourselves. It's nothing personal, but I can see already the numbers are growing. And it's not possible for everyone to have a chance to speak because you'll all speak over each other. I also welcome Arcare, who are joining us today and possibly will join us every week. I think that, and I can't see because I've got too many things happening now, but we may in fact have Emmy Monash joining us today, and possibly will be a weekly event as well for them. Thank you to you all. I noticed there are quite a few people from Wheatso. Miriam obviously has a connection with Wheatso. I think last week I seem to have stepped into a family reunion of Lily Zamel, and this week it looks like I've stepped into a Wheatso AGM. So welcome to you all. Lovely to have you. And it is recorded. And Miriam, don't forget to unmute yourself. You're still muted at the moment, bottom left, because you'll sound so much better if you're unmuted. Sorry, it may be, Miriam, it may be, I've fixed it up. It's probably my fault. Try that again. There you go. Well, it was in fact my fault. So to kick it off, Miriam, a few questions to share amongst family and friends. And first question I have is describe your family. Remember, this is a family program, so keep it clean.
Good morning, Rabbi Ronnie. And everyone. This is something rather new to me, the Zoom, so please be kind, all of you. I'm sure you will. Now, my family. My parents, Rose and Joe Olb, didn't hail from Australia. They were both born in Poland, actually. Dad in Ravaruska, Mum in Rovna. But Dad had his early years in Vienna, so he always thought of him as a Viennese boy, and he rather liked to carry it as a badge of pride for some reason. And that was Dad. And Dad arrived in the 20s to Melbourne with, you know, the usual much talked about £5 note in the pocket, but with a lot of hope. And Dad was a man of self-confidence and a will to work. And actually he would have been a very good poster boy for Dale Carnegie, because he always felt if it was to be, it was up to me. And that catchphrase epitomised my dad very well. Mum's family arrived also in the 20s apparently, but Mum was 10 years Dad's senior, and they were very different types of people. Dad was of a more retiring nature, and Mum was a very vivacious, elegant, bright woman with a great sense of style and dignity and a great sense of humour. And they sort of complemented each other because of that. And Mum was a pretty good foil for Dad because of that difference, but they got on very well. And my brother Max, 3.5 years my senior, both of us were born in Ballarat. And how we came to be in Ballarat, obviously, was because Dad had already been running a business in what was Bridge Street. Now it's upgraded to Bridge Mall, but it was in Bridge Street in Ballarat in the main drag. And he came to Melbourne to do his buying, either in Carlton or Brunswick or Flinders Lane at the time. And so he met up with Mum and was very much in love with her. They got married in June of 1935 on the 16th. And the very next day, Joe took Rose to Ballarat, and that's where their life in Ballarat, well, Mum's life in Ballarat started. She liked Ballarat after a time once she got used to it. However, she said it was the coldest place for sure that the Almighty had created, and she thought the cows gave ice cream instead of milk. So, but she wanted to fit in, and she tried her very best. She was welcomed by the matriarch of the Stone family, which was, the Stone family actually were the uncrowned royalty of Ballarat, I think, certainly with the Jewish community. And Hannah Stone, the matriarch of a large, very prominent family, invited Mum to afternoon tea, and they liked each other and had a very beautiful acceptance and liking towards each other all the time that Mum was living in Ballarat. So Max and I were both born there in the Hospital of Eildon House, as it was known, I believe. And I was there till I was 6 and Max was 10. Or I was 6.5, whatever it was. I went to the local school in Dana Street, which was sort of, it intersected the street we lived in, which was Dufton Street, and that was pretty handy. And Max was going to Ballarat College at the time. And that's basically the closest family, the two kids, myself and Max, and my parents, Rose and Joe.
Wow. Now, what are your earliest memories of Ballarat, though?
I remember at the school, because I was born just at the beginning of World War II, actually the late 39, almost at the end of 39. And I remember Ballarat in the sense of the first year of school. And at that school, they were digging trenches if they felt they were going to need them at any times for safety. And I remember the dairy where you could buy the most wonderful ice blocks that was across the road from where we lived almost. And nothing's ever tasted quite as good as those red, white and blue ice blocks. And I remember there were coupons and there was rationing, and I remember the little coupons that there were also when I was already back in Melbourne, or the first time I was in Melbourne. So they're my first memories of Ballarat. We went to Shul. There were about 20 or 25 families, not a great many, but they loved the Shul, and the Stone family, which I mentioned earlier, were custodians of the Shul and welcomed visitors and welcomed the community of Ballarat, of course. And I'm not sure, but for many, many years, I'm not sure if it's still to this day, but there were high holiday minyanin there. So it's got fond memories, the Shul. One of the members used to sometimes take Max to Shul. It was one of the Floam family. There were not a lot of families, but they were close, being that they were Jewish and they all sort of knew each other. One family was the Bancroft family, and Harry Bancroft became a very clever entrepreneur. He was the first man to bring the Gagiar coffee machines to Australia, and he opened up the Nosh Bar in Surfers Paradise, which was a great success apparently in its day. So the families were nice, but there were not many of them.
Roughly, how many families are you talking about?
I think not many more than 20 Jewish families. 20, 25, I think max. I asked Max and he feels that that would be about tops what were there at the time.
Right. Now, people would have known you were Jewish outside the Jewish community. Is that correct? Your classmates
Yes,
or what?
yes, I'm sure they did.
What was it like being Jewish in a small country town?
I had no negative memories of it, neither did Max, ever. Only one instance comes to mind that my father mentioned. There was a non-Jewish fellow who lived across the road, and he used to like to come over to Rose and Joe's in the summer and have a nice cold beer or whatever, on very friendly terms with them, until one day he made a comment that if Hitler came to the Arch of Victory, he would meet him. So the friendship tended to wane from that time on, as would be understood. But we were very fortunate, and Max and I didn't suffer any nasties with regard to anti-Semitism ever.
Okay, if you don't mind me prying, did you eat kosher at home?
Absolutely.
How did you eat kosher in a hick town?
Well, the reason was that Mum was from an Orthodox family, very Orthodox family, and she was a Carlton girl growing up. She knew all about the kosher butcher shops in Melbourne, sorry. So she arranged for kosher meat to be sent up each week by train. There was only one problem. The problem being that the trains at no time were refrigerated. And certainly in the summer, she often, sadly, had to throw the meat out because it spoiled during the trip. Speaking of no refrigeration, I also have a very vivid memory of the Iceman coming with a huge block of ice on his shoulder and just a sheet of hessian behind it. But refrigeration was very good when it arrived in Melbourne, by the time we were there, which was later on. Dad had a business in Ballarat even before he married Mum. It was a general drapery store, and there was a tobacconist kiosk in the front. He worked very hard, and when Mum came to Ballarat, she manned the shop during the week, and he still went hawking in the surrounding rural areas because there was a need for more money to come in. Things were pretty tight, and it was just after the war had finished. By the time Max turned 10, I think it was, my parents realised that Ballarat might not be the long-term prospect for them to stay, because as I said, there were few families, and most of the families were much, much older people, and the younger ones were there was very little opportunity for a Jewish life going forward. So they didn't hesitate, and by that time the business was a little bit better even, but they didn't hesitate, and they decided that it would be very good to perhaps move to the big smoke in comparison to Melbourne. But that wasn't easy, because it was almost well-nigh impossible to find a home anywhere that you could rent or buy. And if you did so, you had to pay an enormous amount, I understand, of key money. But Dad usually had good ideas, and he came to light with an almost impossible idea. He said to Mum, would she write an advertisement to go in the Melbourne daily papers stating that someone in Ballarat would like to change a house, if possible, with somebody from Melbourne. Now, I would say there would have been one chance in a million that would have found its mark, but against all the odds, it did. And a gentleman replied to the ad. He had been offered a position, and jobs were difficult after the war, as to be the manager of the one and only cinema. in Ballarat, and he was prepared to change houses. We lived in a house in Dufton Street, Ballarat, and the deal was done. He went to the house in Dufton Street, and we moved to 19 La Trobe Street, South Caulfield. And we lived there for quite some years.
And Miriam, if you don't mind, I'll come back to Melbourne in a moment. I still want to ask another question or two about
Sure.
Ballarat. I have to say that I've got a bit of a love for Ballarat. Some of the people here know that I ran a service, historic service, I suppose, this time last year. It was the first night slichot. It was the first time we had run, or that Shul had run first night slichot in some 60 years, I think. And I ran we took a lot of people away from, mainly from St Kilda Shul this time last year. And it was a lovely service. And by the way, can I reiterate your earlier comment about it being a cold place?
Yes.
Because it was. Heating is pretty much non-existent there, certainly in the Shul, and you're quite right, it was a cold place. But I want to ask you, if you don't mind me prying, remember it's just you and me, no one else is listening. We all go like this. Jewish education, did that exist? How did you get any Jewish schooling?
No, I had no.
No cheder classes?
No classes that I can recall at all. We went to the Shul as often as we could, but no classes there. In the years we were there anyway.
Right. Max Yotkovitz, by the way, of course, it's just you and me, there's no one else listening, but Max Yotkovitz has written asking, do you know anything about who built the Shul? The Shul dates back to 1851 from recollection. Any idea about who built the Shul? It's a beautiful Shul.
It is a beautiful Shul. I don't have any idea. All I know is that my parents were, of course, members, and they remained members for decades later after they left, out of town members. 1851. Well,
before you were born, Miriam.
Yes, well, I had a very interesting encounter with my young grandson, Ozzy, who once asked me, after he went for a trip with the school to Sovereign Hill, he said, they call me Eamesy, as you know, Ronnie, and he said, Eamesy, were you there at the time of the gold rush? I said, I was born a little bit later than 1851. So that year sort of still reminds me that 1851, that's what I was asked. So.
And before we move now to Melbourne, one more thing that's come to my mind is about engagement with the community. You said you went to Shul as often as possible. Did you ever have visitors? Were there visitors who rocked up into Ballarat and you decided we would host them or something?
Yes, and there were American servicemen who arrived, and Dad would go on Friday night to Shul and regularly bring home members of the servicing of the army in America as guests. It was no problem for Mum. She was a superb cook and she always cooked for more people than were present. So they had a lovely time, and it was very nice that they were, given some home cooking, which they thoroughly enjoyed, yes. And the people of Ballarat, the Jewish community, did mingle, and they had a nice social interaction between the families.
Very good. By the way, a lot of what you say resonates with me because quite a few of the people I can see in front of me were with me in Adelaide many years ago. And it's quite right. Every Shabbat lunch, I'd bring home randoms. Evie just knew to set up for 15 or 20 people. There were only about 5 of us in the family, but we would pretty much fill the place every Shabbat. I just came home from Shul with people, and that was our arrangement. Yeah.
Very nice.
Let's move to Melbourne. So you moved to Melbourne. You moved straight to South Caulfield, not.
Yes.
Yeah.
We moved to South Caulfield, and what we did then, as far as Shul, was that there was a wonderful couple, Susie and Seffi Hertz, who used their fairly small home in Winston Drive, South Caulfield, as a Shul. The lounge room was for the women, and the dining room was for the men on the opposite side of the hall. And that was the beginning of the South Caulfield Hebrew congregation, sort of. But the people who lived there were very keen to have a bigger shul in time. And Mum and Dad were very involved, as were many other families. I can remember the Bruce family, Edna and Monty, who live in Leopold Street, or Theodore, I always forget which I think it's Leopold Street, right next. They lived in the house next to what became the Shul in later years. And the Fagans, and the Olds, of course, and the Sussmans and the Nagels, a lot of names that people perhaps with you today would remember. And they worked feverishly. I think that's where I learned how to make open savouries, because that was my job, as I remember drying up thousands of cups and saucers. They did everything to raise funds, and they did it very well. They had white elephant stalls, they had bazaars, they had Dutch auctions, including auctioning Mrs. Nagel's honey cake, which was very well known and very good, and all sorts of things. And they slowly got the funds together to build the Shul, or put a deposit down on the Shul, and they rebuilt it, of course, in time. And Mum was the president of the Ladies Auxiliary there for 7 years, and they really worked very, very hard to do the best they could in the time. And it's become also a very popular place with the South Caulfield residents over many years now.
Very good. Now, you yourself have become a bit of a communal macher. You're involved in Wheatso, amongst other things. To what degree was it the modelling of your parents back in Ballarat days that guided you?
Oh, very much so. My parents were very involved in charitable, things. And Mum was a Wizzo had a sim lady for many, many years. And they were also involved with J&F. And in the good old days of what they used to do at weddings, they'd have a collection for the J&F, and Joe was always the one going around the tables. It wasn't unusual. And no, that was their way of life, to look after people as best they could in whatever way they could. I have rather a nice little anecdote, if I may tell you. My dad later, when they moved to Melbourne, they had to virtually start again. And he, for a short time, sold piece goods in Elizabeth Street in an office there. And after that, he bought a business in Carnegie, where he worked there for 30 years until his retirement. And one day he was standing outside the shop. Business was probably pretty quiet inside, so he walked outside. And a Jewish man who was a total stranger walked past him, but they recognised each other as being of the faith. And he spoke to this man, and he said, "How are things with you?" Things were, pretty tight for everybody. And the man said, "I was a dental technician in my homeland, but I'm not allowed to practice my craft here in Australia. And I have a wife and a son, and I can't make ends meet." Now, Dad didn't know him at all. He said, "Give me your name, give me your telephone number, tell me where you live," which the man did, of course. And he said, "And I'll see what I can do to help you." And Dad had business connections because of his business. And he spoke to the people and the manufacturers. Could they help this man in some way to open a stall in the market? He subsequently did, and he was able to make a better home for his, more comfortable home for his wife and his son. And that went on until he got established. But they were lovely people also, and every yontif of the year that came around from that time forward, the beautiful coffee cream torte arrived for our family to share, and they really were lovely. And Mum and Dad were honoured guests at the son's wedding years later, and they wrote a very, very beautiful, sad as it was, condolence message for Dad in the paper. And he passed. So back to bright things. That was really
that. By the way, Miriam, we all need a feel-good story, particularly when it comes to helping people with employment. I think a lot of us are feeling a bit dark at the moment.
Yes.
We're looking forward. I think everyone here is from Victoria, but I can't tell. It looks like it. But I think we're all looking forward to the day when we can break out. I'll make a brief reference to high holidays at the very end. But what I'd like to do is open this up. Now, it's clearly, Miriam, there were, I think, 56 or 57 participants, devices, which is about probably over 100 people. Clearly, I can't get everyone to unmute themselves and ask questions. So what I'm going to do is, for those who are not familiar with this technology, the bottom of your screen, and sometimes you have to move your mouse or cursor or whatever it is, and then it pops up. There's a chat there. If you want to write in the chat, and I can read out the questions and ask Miriam some questions. Yeah, David, go for it. David, would you like to put it in the chat, or you want me to unmute you? You'd like to ask the question? No problems. I've just clicked on unmute. There you go. David, go for it.
Thank you, Miriam. It was a fantastic speech you gave us. I personally have a little bit of history going into Ballarat myself. My son studied at the University of Ballarat for 4 years to become a teacher. And that was roughly at the same time as the sesquicentennial celebration of the Ballarat Shul. And as a member of the Shul choir, we all went up there and sang at that celebration. I think it was a Sunday, from memory, I can't remember. And my family, through my late brother-in-law, Jaime Simon, had an uncle who I believe his name was Paul Simon, who married Jessica Stone.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So they had a very big association with the Shul in Ballarat as well. Obviously, he passed away in 1977, I think, and he was well recommended for monuments and all sorts of honours around the streets of Ballarat because of all the fantastic work that he did. I also found out, I think, that the Shul was built by wealthy German people who happened to be in Ballarat at the time, and they modelled the Shul on one famous Shul somewhere in Germany. That's to my understanding, because I saw someone ask the question about who built the Shul, or when was it built. I don't know when it was built, but that's my understanding, that it was built by wealthy Germans who they copied a synagogue in Germany somewhere. So we used to go up to Ballarat a lot to see my son when he was studying up there at Mount Helen. And yes, it's freezing cold in winter, I can tell you that.
Well, we're all very sure that that's the fact.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's a gold museum.
That's right.
That bears Jessica Stone Simon's name. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Very
I just
nice.
thought I'd pass that on. And
thank you very much. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And Miriam, I have a question here for you. By the way, David was quite right. There's a bit of an incestuous relationship between St Kilda Shul and Ballarat Shul. We're sort of sister shuls. And for the 100th and the 150th, we've organised for our choir and our husband and people, the rabbis and so on, to go there and conduct services. I've got a question here about the age difference between your parents. Did you make a reference?
10 years. Dad was 10 years Mum senior, and which is quite a bit. But they were fine. They were a fine couple. And our family have all said that the happiest years of their childhood were spending time with Nana and Papa. Mm. They were very, very wonderful years. And they were, you know, Mum had the ability, I think I told you, to be a wonderful cook. She was an instinctive cook and nothing was difficult for her. And one of the dishes she made was chicken giblets, and Lenny said he should have patented the recipe because nobody ever could come close. Even though the girls are wonderful cooks, they've never quite mastered Nana's recipe for the giblets. So that's an aside, but that was the case.
Well, Miriam, that's a wonderful segue, by the way. folks, we did not plan this beforehand, but that's a wonderful segue. We're actually out of time, as you know from last week and previous weeks. I'm trying to be a stickler for finishing within a time frame because I know people have limited time. But it's a wonderful segue, Miriam. Firstly, thank you very, very much. You can all do this, or there's
Pleasure
actually,
was all mine.
under reactions, you can actually click on, clap your hands or whatever. Thank you, Mandy. I can see those are coming up now. But that was wonderful segue to not only say thank you, but to introduce Miriam, next week's guest. Our next week's guest has joined us again today. It's Carmel Bridgman, and she will be doing cooking. This is only for the men, but if women want to join, you're welcome to. Thanks, I can see a few people there. Typical, those people who laugh, by the way, that's typical female chauvinistic attitude. So next week, Carmel is actually going to be preparing a carrot kugel, I believe, with us.
Oh, nice.
And the recipe what appeared in today's newsletter, which means you'll be able to prepare those ingredients between now and then, in a week away. Yes, you're allowed to leave the house here in Victoria to go shopping for carrot kugel ingredients. And you're welcome to make the carrot kugel in real time with Carmel. It's a special treat before Rosh Hashanah. By the way, if anyone is not on the Shul email list, and you don't have to be, also, by the way, you don't have to be a member of the Shul to get it, so you can let me know. But either way, you can email me or write something in the chat now if you like, and I'll take a record of it. If you want me to either put you on the email list or you want the ingredients for next week, happy to send it to you so that you can participate, because it's not just something to watch next week, but I'm hoping that you'll get engaged and actually do something. Give me your address and I'll be coming around sampling all of those carrot kugels and also tasting a bit of that whiskey that I know you've all put aside for me. So thank you again, Miriam. Looking forward, Carmel. In 2 weeks' time, we've got, since some of you seem to be quite nostalgic, we've got a young man who's actually speaking about old stuff. It's a guy called Aaron Lewin, who's been writing a blog and a website called Brick and Mortar, and he has been interviewing a lot of the local shops, including Bly's Shoe Repair in Elston, in the Glen Huntly Road, a lot of the places that you're familiar with. He's interviewed them, and we're going to interview him in 2 weeks' time about some of the fascinating stories he's collected of local older shops. A brief comment about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. By now you will be aware that it does not look like your shul, whether it's St Kilda Shul or any other shul, will be open here in Victoria for high holiday services. That doesn't mean that you can't participate in a meaningful way. I know that our shul and probably many other shuls are providing information. This is only between friends, and we've only got about 51 devices. But between friends, I can tell you a secret, and that is that tomorrow our shul, St Kilda Shul, will be posting out a pack to each of our member families. But certainly I can email some things to those people who are interested, and I can see some email addresses coming up now, so I'll add you to the email list. But we'll be providing a pack so that you can have a meaningful Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur at home. It not only it'll have a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur guide, which not only has the candle lighting times and that sort of stuff and the appropriate days, but also has a list of mahzor pages. So you at home, if you feel inspired and you want to open the mahzor and say something or sing something you vaguely recollect from previous years, it actually has a list of those prayers and songs that and your mahzor page, whether you use a Rutledge or Adler or Art Scroll or whatever, there's a list there. So that's in a booklet that we're posting out, and I'm happy to email that to people who are otherwise not on the list. That booklet, by the way, is in today's St Kilda Shul newsletter and will reappear next week, so people will have it to download. It also, by the way, if you download it and not just use the print version, you'll be able to click on some links that we've put in that booklet so you can hear some of the tunes. And our shul, by the way, will be delivering some services pre-Yom Tov. Obviously, an Orthodox shul will not be delivering online services on Yom Tov, but we will be delivering pre-Yom Tov, including, by the way, Kol Nidre, for example, with our Chazan, and Rabbi will say a few words. That'll be 5 o'clock on Erev Yom Tov. No halachic problem with doing that before Yom Tov. So I'm happy to, I can see some email addresses, happy to add those to our Shabbat Shalom newsletter, and you'll be kept informed. And today's newsletter that went out, I'll try to email those people as well. Someone's asked about Brighton Shul. Look, I don't know what every shul is doing. I do know that most shuls are making extra effort to reach out to their members. That page list of Machzor pages, I actually personally prepared, and it has been sent to all rabbis in Victoria to send out. And I understand quite a few shuls have already sent out those Machzor pages that I prepared for our shul. So make the very best, because it's a different world, but it's a time that we can reset, and maybe the world we came out of was not the best world, and we've got an opportunity to do something better with it now. So I wish you all the very best. Looking forward to catching up with you. I think I've got someone waving now. I wish you all the very best. Looking forward to catching up with you again. Same time next week, same channel. So it's the same Zoom ID. If you don't get another email, you'll know it's the same. It's 11 o'clock, same Zoom ID. Thank you very much, Miriam. Thank you once again.
It was a pleasure, Ray. Thank you.
News be good news. Have an amazing day for the rest of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now what do we do?
I'll turn it off, Miriam. I'll just make a copy of all those email addresses. No one's just come in. I'll do that now before I close the session.
Okay. Thank you very much.